It's April 2nd, 2025, and the White House just dropped a massive wave of new tariffs that could reshape the global trade landscape overnight. From a 10% baseline tariff on nearly all imports to punishing country-specific duties and the end of the de minimis exemption for China, this isn't just a policy change, it's a trade war reset. In this video, we're breaking down exactly what happened, why it matters, and what it could mean for your business, your wallet, and the global economy. If you appreciate in-depth, real-time coverage of complex trade policy like this, support the channel by hitting that like button and subscribing. It helps us keep producing useful content for the trade and business community. Stick around. The details are wild and the consequences are real. Quick-fire recap of today's headlines. Let's start with what the White House just announced. A 10% universal tariff on most imports, starting April 5th. Even higher tariffs for specific countries like China, Japan, and the EU. A complete end to the de minimis exemption for Chinese packages under $800, effective May 2nd. An official reciprocal tariff framework to match trade barriers imposed by other nations. Exemptions for strategic goods, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, books, lumber, and goods already covered by Section 232, and a clear message: we're done being ripped off. At the core of this new policy is what President Trump calls a baseline fairness tariff. Starting April 5th, a 10% tariff will apply to nearly all imported goods entering the United States. But it doesn't stop there. The administration is also layering on extra duties for specific countries that have long-standing trade surpluses with the United States. Here's how that breaks down. China, already facing a 20% tariff, is now hit with an additional 34%, bringing the total to a whopping 54%. Japan is now subject to a 24% total tariff. The European Union is hit with a 20% duty across key sectors. Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom are still facing the baseline 10%, but, retaliation is on the table. This marks a major escalation in United States trade policy, and it's happening fast. Another major move announced today targets e-commerce and low-value imports from China and Hong Kong. The United States will officially eliminate the de minimis exemption for these countries starting May 2nd. Until now, packages valued under $800 could enter the country duty-free under a long-standing trade exemption. This rule was originally designed for low-volume personal imports, but in recent years it has been heavily used by Chinese online retailers like Shein, Temu, and AliExpress to flood the United States market with cheap goods. According to the White House, this loophole allowed millions of packages to bypass customs duties every day, undercutting U.S. businesses and evading safety and labeling regulations. Once the change takes effect, all packages from China and Hong Kong will be subject to full duties and inspections regardless of value. This is expected to disrupt direct-to-consumer shipping models, increase delivery times, and raise prices for imported goods in key sectors like apparel, electronics, and household items. Retailers that rely on small parcels from China may need to restructure their supply chains or face a steep increase in landed costs. This is not just a policy tweak, it's a fundamental shift in how small imports from China are treated, and it could ripple across e-commerce platforms almost immediately. While the new tariff wave is broad, it's not universal. The White House has made it clear that some products will be exempt from these duties, and those choices are not random. According to official statements, the exemptions include pharmaceuticals, semiconductors and microchips, books, lumber, certain types of paper and printed goods, Section 232 goods like steel and aluminum, which are already covered under earlier national security tariffs. The reasoning behind these carve-outs is strategic. Many of these products are considered essential to U.S. public health, technological leadership, or national security. Others, like steel and aluminum, are already protected under existing tariff frameworks. For semiconductors and chips in particular, the exemption reflects an effort to avoid disrupting high-tech manufacturing, where the U.S. is trying to regain competitive ground. These materials are critical for everything from smartphones to defense systems. Books and printed media were also spared, possibly to avoid inflaming cultural or educational trade ties. Lumber and energy products that the U.S. cannot produce in sufficient quantity are excluded to prevent shortages or price shocks. Taken together, the exemptions offer a window into how the administration is balancing trade enforcement with economic stability and industrial policy. The goal appears to be tough on trade, but not reckless. At the core of today's announcement is a philosophy the Trump administration has pushed since day one: reciprocity in trade. The White House argues that for decades the United States has maintained low tariffs and open markets while many of its trading partners have kept their own markets protected. This, they claim, has led to massive and persistent trade deficits, job losses, and the erosion of American manufacturing. Now the goal is to reset the playing field. According to the official statement, these new tariffs are meant to regulate imports in a way that responds directly to the trade barriers imposed by other nations. If another country places a 20% tariff on American goods, the U.S. will now respond in kind. The 10% baseline tariff is described as a floor, a universal minimum applied to nearly everything entering the country, while the higher duties for countries like China and the European Union are positioned as targeted enforcement against what the administration calls unfair practices. This shift is also meant to reduce dependency on foreign supply chains. By making certain imports more expensive, the administration hopes to encourage domestic production and investment in key industries. Critics argue that this approach could backfire, increasing prices for consumers and inviting retaliation from major trade partners. But supporters say it's a long overdue correction that puts American workers first and forces other nations to open their markets more fairly. Either way, this is not a short-term policy. It signals a structural change in how the United States manages global trade relationships. The global response to these new U.S. tariffs has been swift and divided. Countries hit hardest, like China and the European Union, have already issued strong statements condemning the measures. China's Ministry of Commerce called the tariffs unilateral and confrontational, warning that they reserve the right to retaliate. Meanwhile, officials in Brussels labeled the move provocative and are reportedly exploring legal action through the World Trade Organization. Canada and Australia, while currently facing only the baseline 10% tariff, have also pushed back. Canada's trade minister described the policy as a direct threat to North American cooperation and signaled that countermeasures are under consideration if the tariffs expand. The United Kingdom managed to avoid the steepest penalties, prompting mixed reactions in Europe. Some officials accuse the U.S. of playing favorites, while others are quietly working to renegotiate trade terms and avoid escalation. Economists around the world are warning of possible ripple effects. Some predict higher prices for U.S. consumers, disruptions to global supply chains, and even the risk of a broader trade conflict if retaliation spreads. However, others argue that the tariffs may succeed in pushing countries to the negotiating table. They point to past trade standoffs, like the 2019 U.S.-China trade war, where tough tariffs eventually led to revised agreements and concessions. Whether this is the start of meaningful trade reform or a step toward renewed global friction remains to be seen. This is not just a policy update, it's a major turning point in U.S. trade strategy. With a 10% baseline tariff, country-specific penalties, and the end of de minimis for Chinese goods, the White House is sending a clear message. The era of open-door trade is over. Reciprocity is the new rule. For businesses, that means recalculating supply chains. For consumers, it could mean price increases on everyday items. And for international partners, it's a signal that the United States is no longer willing to tolerate what it sees as one-sided deals. Whether this new strategy brings balance to global trade or sparks a fresh wave of retaliation remains to be seen. But either way, the impact will be felt, fast. We'll keep tracking how this unfolds, and what it means for industries, jobs, and global markets in the weeks ahead. If you found this breakdown helpful, support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more trade updates, and dropping a comment below with your take on these new tariffs. Thanks for watching, and as always, sources are listed in the description.